When she was 2 years old, no family history, no reason for this. They got the shock of their life to find out that she had a brain tumor in her brainstem in a very tenuous area. So like any good parents, they followed the best of what medicine had to offer. And this time the doctor said, look, it's back in her brainstem in a place where it would be impossible to operate. And one of their friends said, I know this healer in Tel Aviv, and I know that, you guys are in California, and I know this sounds crazy, but she does distant healing. And I think she could really help. So they talked with this healer, and then she began working on Mira energetically to focus on the tumor. They weren't doing anything else. They weren't doing chemo, radiation, medications, special diets, nothing. Mira was just seeing this distant healer. A few months later, they went for a scan and they found out that her tumor had shrunk and reversed completely. The tumor never came back.
Welcome, everyone. I'm joined by Dr. Shamini Jain, who is a clinical psychologist and an award-winning researcher and founder of the Consciousness Healing Initiative, which is a global collaborative organization advancing healing through science, education, and the arts. Now, Shamini is also an adjunct professor at UC San Diego, and she's a leading voice in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, integrative health, and of course, biofield sciences. She is also an international keynote speaker, self-healing teacher, and author of the acclaimed book, Healing Ourselves. So please welcome Shamini.
Hey, Jason, it's so great to see you.
Great to see you too, Shamini, and thank you for holding space for this very important work. I want to start off with this question because I ask this with all my guests. What excites you right now in this moment?
Well, many things excite me. Right now, what's distracting me is my dog losing his mind with his chew toy as we're chatting, but it's reminding me of the potential for imminent joy that we have. And as you know, I've been a huge proponent and researcher, explorer in this area of the biofield. And I tell folks sometimes, because people say, well, Shamini, your joy is like kind of unendless for this field. You've been kind of pushing this forward for many decades. Like, what fuels you with that work? And I say it's its potential for understanding our deep interconnection, not just within ourselves, but between us and with us and the planet. And I really am excited now because I feel like biofield science and healing, biofield healing practices are coming online in a way for people that we haven't experienced before. Whether it's the advancement of research that we're seeing, which is mind-blowing research, which I know we're going to be talking about today. I'm laughing because as I'm watching my dog, do his thing, running up and down this room with his toy, I'm just reminded of the divine Shakti that really is emanating through all of us at all times, and how we could be as simple as my dog right now and enjoy our energy.
Yes. And I think as you say that, I'm also enjoying the energy as well, right? Because with interviews in itself, it can be a little bit rigid, but I love the interplay and how the universe throws in different pieces and nuggets, right? Just to make things fun and enjoyable. And I really think this will be a really enjoyable conversation because my mission and focus is to bridge mind and body, right? Consciousness to how we can understand that affecting health and well-being. And you are a trailblazer, I would say, in this field. And, one of the first people that has started talking about biofield sciences as something legitimate. And before we get into that, I know you have a couple of key sort of projects coming up. So I would definitely like to highlight that in the beginning, just to help the viewers kind of understand where things are going and where things are moving towards. Because like you said, it's more exciting now than ever.
It really is. And just to reference your point, thank you for that very sweet notion or compliment. But what I would say is, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And actually, this relates to some of the very exciting news that I have to share. Our nonprofit, Consciousness and Healing Initiative, is so enthused about what we're seeing and the scientific validity of it, but also the grounding in indigenous wisdom. So when we say we're standing on the shoulders of giants, it's every single culture across the world that has understood the relevance of what we call the biofield in Western science to healing and interconnection. And we're really pleased to be bringing out later this fall a wonderful documentary on the subject called The Energy That Heals. So if you go to theenergythatheals.com, you'll see the trailer. Jump on the email list and we'll let you know when we're going to be sharing about it. I think I can share this. We already got the thumbs up from PBS, so we'll be sharing it on PBS, which is a really huge thing for the field. But this film was really bringing it together because it's not just one person ever that advances anything. And in fact, the reason why I founded the Consciousness and Healing Initiative is, even though I was doing my own randomized placebo controlled trials at UC San Diego and other places on biofield science, I realized that the change that we wanted to see was not going to just happen out of one laboratory or one person. It's going to really take a village. And so each of us is important. So the film is really great because it's grounding what we know in indigenous practices like Qigong and curanderismo, for example. But we're also following the stories of patients who have greatly benefited. Some extraordinary stories, which, I know you were interested in potentially talking about today, but also the science that, again, these modes of knowing, the modes of exploring the field, the energy field through our own felt experience is so important and so valuable and relevant. And at the same time, science is a beautiful language that can help us to scale out our offerings of healing to the hospital community, the clinical community. So we're excited to tell the story about the science in this film as well and share some of the most incredible things that we're discovering.
So I'm really excited, and thank you for sharing that. And I will leave all the information linked down below, of course, for everyone to see. So to kind of jump into things, Shamini, I know you have your book here, which is Healing Ourselves, which is the science of biofield therapies. In your book, you started off with sort of a really fascinating and miraculous story of, this toddler with a malignant brain tumor that seemingly disappeared, right? And I want us to surround this conversation initially and help us define what biofield therapies is and why did you start your book off this way? Because it's a really strong hook, and especially for those that might not know about biofield therapies, that might not have heard of it, it definitely gets their attention. So
And
can
it
you help
got
us
my
explain that?
attention. Yeah, absolutely. I shared it because, it just, even for someone who's been in this field and been studying it for 20 years, 25 years, whatever it's been, that story came to me during a dinner conversation with someone I'd never met before. So I'm, at a dinner with some friends, and some fellow comes to me in the kitchen and we're just hanging out, eating, and we sit down at the table chowing, and he just proceeds to tell me this story about his daughter. I had never met him. He had no idea what I did. And he proceeds to tell me about his daughter, Mira. I don't know why he decided to tell me this, but I was so struck by the story that I thought, this is really the point, isn't it? For us to understand how extraordinary we are. Whether we're doing the healing or facilitating the healing, we can talk about, what does it mean to be a healer, or we're receiving it. What does it mean? What does it mean for the potential, not just in terms of healing in our biology, but our own consciousness, and the way that our consciousness can go out and reach another and foster a healing response in incredibly profound ways. So I'm glad that you enjoyed that start of the book, because the book does have a lot of science in it. I mean, full disclosure, I actually had no intention of writing a book. I was sitting down to do a podcast with Tammy Simon, and I didn't even realize it was with Tammy Simon until about 5 minutes before, because I'm running like a crazy person. And I thought, oh my God, like, it's with Tammy Simon. I have the highest respect for. If y'all don't know who she is, she's the founder of Sounds True Publications. She's again, another giant that we stand on the shoulders with, sharing about the realities of meditation, healing for a long time. Anyway, I was sitting down with her, and she said, Shamini, before we begin, I have two questions. Where is your book? And can Sounds True have a crack at publishing it? And I said, well, Tammy, I never thought about writing a book. Tell me why you think I should write a book. And she said, because even in my position as CEO of this giant, publishing company that does so much in meditation, the minute I talk about energy healing, I get eye rolls and people think it's woo. And she said, look, you're in this really privileged position where you've been studying this at, Ivy League universities, doing your own research. And you come from, an Indian background where they understood energy and the subtle bodies. So we really need someone to tie it together. So most of the book is tying it together, sharing indigenous perspectives on healing, things like the subtle bodies, the relationship of energy with consciousness, and the data. So a lot of that book is about the data, and also healing practices at the end, because ultimately we want to put it into practice, right? So I was really pleased to write that book, and really grateful that it got a great reception. It won 2 awards. And I think another kind of reflection, again, other books have been written that are fabulous. I want to call out one of the founders of the field, Jim Oshman, who has written so much and is such a pioneer in the field. Beverly Rubik, so many people that have been advancing biofield science for so long, and that were really great mentors to me as well. But you asked about Mira. So why did I start with Mira? Because it's phenomenal. And it tells us, I think, a lot about how healing works. So shall I take us through the story a bit? Would this be a good time to do that?
Yes, please. I think that would capture the audience.
So I want to tell you all about Mira. As I mentioned, I learned about Mira through a dinner conversation with someone that I had never met before. And we were sitting down. He had no idea what I did. And he told me about his daughter, who I hadn't met at the time. He was sharing with me that when she was 2 years old, she developed a brain tumor. No family history, no reason for this. They actually just thought she was sick or something. They took her to the doctor to see if she had the flu because she was projectile vomiting. And then they got the shock of their life to find out that she had a brain tumor in her brainstem in a very tenuous area. So like any good parents, they followed the best of what medicine had to offer, and they went for surgery and radiation knowing that there were some risks. Well, there were some risks, and Mira survived from that, but she had some developmental delays which were quite significant because of the area that had to be radiated and the place of the tumor. Still, the tumor seemed to be out, and she seemed to be better until the tumor started coming back several months later. And this time, when they went to the doctors said, look, we can't tell you what to do. At this point, it's come back in her brainstem in a place where it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to operate. We wouldn't recommend operation anymore. And it's possible that we could radiate it, but it's also possible that we, at this point, don't know what her life would be like if we radiate it further. Mira's already experiencing seizures and other things at this point, right? She has significant developmental delays. So it's a horrible situation, right? For anybody, and for the parents especially, to be put in that position of like, this is all we can offer. We don't know what else to tell you. So they were really up in arms and considering not doing anything and just letting Mira live out whatever life she had left. And one of their friends came to them and he said, listen, I know this sounds really far out, but I know this healer in Tel Aviv. Okay, full disclosure, you guys, I'm going to tell you this healer is no longer with us in body, because everybody asks me this question when I tell the story. So just know that. He said, I know this healer in Tel Aviv, and I know that, you guys are in California, and I know this sounds crazy, but she does distant healing. And I think she could really help Mira. I have a really good feeling about this. And, this couple was very spiritual and religious, and they thought, well, it can't hurt, sure, we'll talk to them. We'll try anything. We don't know what this is about. So they talked with this healer whose name was Sarah. Just a quick digression. I talk about this a little bit more in the book, but Sarah's own story, the healer, is extraordinary. And it's quite relevant, I think, to our times to mention this. Sarah was a survivor of the Holocaust. She was a baby at that time. And for those who don't know what they used to do to these people, to these Jewish people in the concentration camps, when they had a child, when a person in the concentration camp, a concentration camp prisoner, was in the concentration camp and they had a child, if they were executed, they were told to hold their child in front of them like this. They were shot in the back so that they would fall over and suffocate the child. I mean, it's just horrible what they did. Anyway, Mira was found right after the war was called over. Her father was holding her. He was executed and he fell on her, but somehow she survived. And she always said that she felt like she survived because she felt like she had been given a gift. Clearly the gift of forgiveness, but also the gift to heal. And so that's a little bit about this healer story, quite extraordinary in of itself. So when the couple, David and Meera, met with Sarah, who was the healer, they said, look, we don't know how this works, but we're open to anything. And she explained to them, she said, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to just advise you on how to keep a happy home environment, how to keep stress at a minimum at home, how to help Mira feel comfortable. Now, remember, Mira's only 2 years old, right? She said, but ultimately, I need you to understand that Mira is really the healer. I am facilitating a process by which I'm connecting Mira with her higher self, her soul, her spirit, however we describe it, her connection with her innermost self. And she is the one that is going to decide what happens. All I'm going to do is facilitate the process. So if she wants this healing to happen on the physical level, it will happen. But you may see changes in her emotion, changes in the home environment, and all these things as well, because healing is an interconnected system. So she counseled them in this way. And then she began working on Mira. And her process was, of course, to feel into her energy field. She felt like she could actually see where the tumor was. And she worked energetically to also focus on the tumor, hoping to reduce it. They weren't doing anything else. They weren't doing chemo. They weren't doing radiation. They weren't taking medications. They weren't doing special diets, nothing. Mira was just seeing this distant healer. Again, distant, right? A few months later, they noticed that Mira seemed to be better, so they went for a scan and they found out that her tumor had shrunk to the size of a dime. And a few months later, it had reversed completely. The tumor never came back. And Mira's alive and kicking today. She's highlighted in our film. I can't wait for you guys to see her in all of her beauty and glory. She's a dancer. She's incredible. She's actually walking in global beauty pageants for the specially abled as a representative of the specially abled in global pageants. She is a force. She's incredible. And she has serious developmental delay still, right? She has seizures and, it's a lot. Her life is not necessarily always easy, nor are her parents. But there's so much that we have learned about healing from Mira's story. Miraculous healing happens. Healing is whole system. Healing is really dependent on us. This type of healing with the biofield appears to be effective at a distance when you look at stories like Mira's. Now, that's anecdotal. We can talk about the research and what it's telling us later. But it is a hook, like you say, because it makes you wonder, who are we as humans? What are we capable of? What kind of healing can take place in each of us, whether we have tumors or whether we're just really sad about the state of the world? And how could connecting with our energy actually foster the healing within us and between us that we so greatly need right now?
So thank you for sharing that, because I wanted to start off the conversation this way to really highlight the potential, right, and the impact that this field can have on whether it's miracles, right, that we see and the stories. And I'm so happy to hear that she's going to be featured on the film, because that is an incredible testimonial, but also to the everyday miracles that we can experience using these biofield therapies. So with that in mind, can you help us kind of from that big story ground us back to what is the science of biofield therapies, and what is the research, what is the latest research to kind of give us the footprints to understanding what's going on? Because I think for a lot of people, like you've mentioned, show me the data, because
Yeah.
if even with the story, this powerful story about Mira, without the data they might not believe it
Yeah, it could be
100%.
spontaneous remission. It could be
Yeah.
placebo. It's one person. I mean, that's not data, right? It's a beautiful story. It's meaningful, but where's the data and what might it mean if there is data? What might that mean for science and medicine and, the implementation of healing practices? So I'll give you a thumbnail. Okay. As I mentioned, and we can get into more detail on certain studies if you want, but here's the upshot of what we know. We have over 450 clinical trials of what we call biofield healing therapies, which are energy-based types of therapies like Reiki, pranic healing, therapeutic touch, healing touch, laying on of hands, Jo Ray, Satnam Rasayam, others. Not everything has been studied, and I want to call out that a lot of indigenous biofield healing practices have not been studied. First of all, they never called them biofield healing practices. So there's a lot that we still don't know about a lot of different practices, a lot of great things we can explore. But what we do know when we take together, these over 450 clinical trials and over 150 randomized controlled trials, with really rigorous ways of looking at the data through systematic reviews and meta-analyses, where we pull together the data and look at the outcomes in a more unified way, looking at quality and things like that. What do we learn? Well, they're effective for pain, both in inpatients and outpatients, meaning patients in the hospital and patients not in the hospital. They're helpful for mental health. We've seen several studies now, high quality studies, show impacts on things like anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've personally done some of those studies, so I could speak to that. We're seeing effects underneath the skin. So this just isn't like mental, emotional, or based on self-report questionnaires, but There are a number of studies. I've conducted some myself. My randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial at UC San Diego looked at an energy healing practice called energy chelation, which was a hands-on practice compared to mock or sham. And we found not only did the real energy therapy create profound decreases in fatigue breast cancer survivors, which is the number one complaint among cancer patients and survivors, it actually improved their cortisol rhythm. That is the rhythm of their cortisol throughout the day, which is a really valuable and important potential prognostic biomarker. So we saw those effects under the skin, but we weren't the only ones. Other people have seen effects on things like natural killer cell cytotoxicity, which reflects kind of a maintenance of the immune system when people are receiving something like healing touch compared to relaxation or usual care when they're undergoing chemoradiation. So it's useful. These data are suggesting that it's not an either or, right? We could potentially engage in having these healing therapies even when we're going through the general kind of allopathic approach to cancer treatment. It doesn't have to be an either or, and it is helpful. But I'd say, Jason, some of the most, oh my God, groundbreaking work that is being done speaks to this question that a lot of scientists have about, well, show us the mechanism. Now, we can have a lively conversation about what mechanism means. I don't like the term because if you understand biology, you understand there's never a singular mechanism for anything. Even inflammatory cytokines, which are cell signaling molecules in the body, behave differently depending on the environment that they're in. And they affect different cells differently. It's what we call pleiotropy or pleiotropic, effects of action. So there's no such thing as a singular mechanism anyway. That's like from drug development. And I honestly don't think it applies when we study things like healing and integrative health because we're looking at a whole system. But having said that, what are the cell and animal studies saying about energy healing and consciousness and abilities to heal down to the physical level? There's some groundbreaking set of studies that are coming out from MD Anderson Cancer Center under the direction of my good friend and colleague, Dr. Lorenza Cohen, who really runs the integrative medicine research program there, received millions of dollars of grants for his studies in yoga and acupuncture and other areas. We could have a lively conversation of the story of what it takes to even do research like this, but he was able to seek some private funding because the NIH won't fund studies in energy healing. The DoD won't, like the typical places researchers have gone in the past to get funding for, they don't fund the stuff because it's so just flies in the face of materialism. They can't handle it. But he was able to get a good amount of funding to support the research that is now coming out. And this research is showing us under very carefully controlled conditions where they are replicating the studies over and over again with different kinds of healers, that energy healing delivered to cells or delivered to animals that are injected with cancer are showing effects on reducing the spread of cancer either in the dish or in the body of mice reliably and robustly, to the extent that you're not seeing the spread of cancer in the bodies. You're seeing changes in inflammatory cytokines, reductions in inflammatory cytokines that guide the process of what we call metastasis or cancer spread, changes in cell subsets, even changes in protein kinase signaling, or these signaling molecules, these proteins in the body that are signaling how things should be flowing and moving in the body. That's all changing in respect to energy healing. Now, I get into more detail on the science in my book. And I want to say that this work that's coming out of MD Anderson Cancer Center is actually replicating initial work that was done at Harvard and at the University of Connecticut. So we're starting to see building evidence across different labs that energy is really having an effect all the way under the skin in carefully controlled, placebo-controlled conditions in ways that are profound, showing us, that we're speaking through the language of vibration. And the more that we can understand the language of vibration and how consciousness directs it, the more we'll be able to guide this healing process.
It's really exciting to hear and see the magnitude of research that you've mentioned, right? It's from humble beginnings, from, you mentioned the shoulders of great giants to the early findings from some of these labs, but also to what MD Anderson, which is the number one cancer research center in the United States. And I've personally met Lorenzo Cohen, and I've seen his lecture on this exact study that you're mentioning about these cellular outcomes of biofield therapies, and it's painting such a beautiful picture that I think that people, especially scientists, cannot deny no longer. Right
Yeah.
there is this field around us.
Well, it is an emerging field from a research perspective. These findings are incredibly provocative, right? From the scientific point of view, there's a lot more that we need to and ought to study, and not just for the sake of studying it, but because as we explore this, it's probably going to reshape the whole way that we think about biology. The whole way that we think about our biology, but even the whole field of biology may actually shift or deepen, widen in some way as we begin to explore this bioenergetic communication. And that's already happening. Look, mainstream research is already showing us that cancer cells behave differently bioelectromagnetically than regular cells. There's different communication. Voltage gradients are actually different between cancer cells than they are for regular cells. We just haven't thought to look at this level of what I might call granularity, right? And so when we are able to measure some of these things, which we are able to measure electrical gradients between cell membranes, we just haven't been able to get the funding to do that most of the time. This has been something that's been on many scientists' minds for decades to do. There's so many ways that we'll be able to advance the science of biofield in ways that are going to help us potentially prevent disease before it begins. And so that's really exciting. Lorenzo's a good friend of mine. I've known him for decades. We've done a lot of work together, co-presented together. He's actually on our scientific advisory council for my nonprofit Consciousness and Healing Initiative. And as you mentioned, he gave a full lecture on some of his initial findings in our Science of Healing course. So as part of what we do at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, we educate. We have free webinars every first Friday of the month, which people can pop into, where we interview the latest scientists, but also the most amazing and beautiful healing practitioners to make this really real for ourselves. But for anyone who's interested, I would recommend that you also check out our Science of Healing course. If you go to scienceofhealingcourse.com, you'll see some of the most incredible leading lights, including some of our dear friends and folks that you guys probably know, like Deepak Chopra and Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, of course, Lorenzo, healing practitioners, again, giant healing practitioners like Donna Eden, others. So we're really engaged in this course of being able to explore both the science and the practice. There's access to some of the best peer-reviewed published literature and summaries of those, and panel discussions with some of the leaders in the field so you can hear straight from their mouths about what they're seeing and what it might mean. So I want to invite people to check out that course. It's scienceofhealingcourse.com.
And I'll have that all linked below for everyone to definitely access. And I have to second what you're saying about the webinars. I remember the first time I watched a Chi webinar, I was at a rock climbing gym in Connecticut, and I was still in grad school. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't know there was a organization that talked about the science of these things, and that's how I got started. And like you mentioned, I'm fascinated by all these amazing, brilliant scientists and researchers, right? And you mentioned bioelectricity, and I watched a webinar with Michael Levin, right, on his whole amazing and fascinating work behind bioelectricity and how
Yeah.
that seems to be like the true top-down gradient of biology. Even surpassing genetics and genes, which throws a whole new paradigm shift into the field. But it's like you're saying, there's so many ways we can carve this picture to show and prove that this field of energy and information, which is informed by consciousness, which has been practiced and taught for thousands of years by different, ancient wisdom and traditions and healing practices, which is finally coming together in this now moment very, very concisely. So I'm super excited now. Definitely share the Science of Healing course for everyone to check out
Yeah,
too,
Mike
just
is in it
because,
too. Mike is in that Science of Healing course, and his work is phenomenal. What a phenomenal human!
yeah,
Things that he's discovering are incredible,
yeah.
and he's a very, very careful scientist. I will say that uh, for many years I have been cultivating community, including community of scientists around this. And like anything with an emerging field, you have to kind of build with trust and love. And we actually began the Consciousness and Healing Initiative to support the community of scientists because they didn't have anyone they could talk to. I mean, they were afraid to it's like literally we joke about like the Consciousness and Healing Initiative is helping people come out of the closet around this work. And I have to tell you, that's really true, because whether it's scientists getting comfortable to share what they're yearning to study or what they're actually finding in a community, a trusted community of people who don't think they're crazy but can actually help them advance the field, or it's a group of healing practitioners who are so jazzed about the research that we're showing. And literally, I've had healers come to me after my talks, that I'll give on the science of healing, in tears, and say, thank you so much for what you guys are doing, because now I can stand in my own authority and be even more stronger in my light when I talk about what this is and how important it is, right? Because a lot of times healers are shut down. Like, people are laugh at them, or like, just kind of roll their eyes when they say I'm working with energy fields. It's really not cool, honestly. There's much more I could say about that in terms of the denigration of the feminine, in general, in this kind of work. But when we cultivate this community, which is what Consciousness and Healing Initiative does, it's profound. And even, our supporters, the donors that I speak to, high power CEOs of multinational corporations, for example, are just looking for a way to open the conversation around their spiritual experiences, around their energetic experiences and their healing experiences. So we're helping people really come out of the closet in this way, no matter where we are. And the film, is a great tool. The webinars are a great tool. They're free. So you can like kind of share that with anybody. Hey, check this out, just as a way of opening the conversation with someone.
Yeah, and like you said, the community piece is, I guess, so much more important now than ever, with technology ramping up and people um, just feeling a need to integrate what they're experiencing, right, with these spiritual experiences, and it's hard to find like-minded people. So I'm so grateful for Chi, because it is one of the best communities organizations that does it so well, right? Integrating the science with the experience of consciousness as well. And speaking of integration, Shamini, how do we bring the data, the results from the lab into our living room? Because I find that, yes, we can talk about the data all day long, but what are some practical takeaways, which I know you talk about in your book as well, for the audience to really integrate this and to really feel and experience this field and the potential of what biofield sciences is?
Well, by being alive, we are vibrating energy, and we're surrounded by energy, and we are energy. We are that. And the beautiful thing, and this is actually substantiated in the data, is it doesn't matter what practice we choose. We just choose a practice, and we choose to practice. And these can be practices including pranayama, which literally means life force extension, or breath work, part of the 8 limbs of yoga, Patanjali's yoga. We can do yoga asana, right? We can do qigong, we can do tai chi, we can dance, we can sing, we can learn a formal energy healing practice like pranic healing. There's so many ways for us to cultivate a felt sense of our energy. Meditation, of course, another, many different forms. And the data actually shows us that all of these, in terms of health effects, are significant reductions in inflammation, harmonization of the nervous system. So, more similarities than differences, especially with those self healing kind of biofield practices like meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, breath work, and so on. But even singing and dancing, and I would add being in nature. So all it takes for us, even if this is all new for us, some of us watching are, seasoned energy healers. We know this really well. We work with the field every day. Some of us may be new to this. Like, this is an interesting concept. Like, how do I make it, out of my head and like into my experience? And there's so many ways. So maybe we could actually just do a little practice right now, Jason. Would that be
Sure,
cool?
absolutely.
I'm a singer. And so for me, I actually came to this learning the power of vibration through sound making. And so it's something that's intuitive to all of us, though many of us are shut down with voice and singing. We're just going to explore our energy with our voice. And so I'm going to invite all of us to just take a nice breath, a nice natural breath, and just breathe in and breathe out. Yeah, just in that nice sound on the exhale. It doesn't even have to be loud. Just and just notice where you feel that sound. There's no right or wrong way to feel, or, you don't feel anything. It's totally fine. But just see when you're doing these exhales and you're just breathing in Out and just notice where you feel it. For me at the moment, I'm feeling a deep resonance in my chest. So that's kind of cool for me to notice. Like I'm feeling this real resonance in my chest. But sometimes I feel it in my belly. Now I'm going to give us a little practice that I think is really helpful for us to just digest things that are going on in the day, even digest emotions, and kind of help us be more grounded. So, this is a grounding with sound mini practice. I have a full practice actually of grounding with sound as a free gift on my website. So, if people go to shaminijan.com and sign up, you'll get a free grounding with sound meditation, which is a longer version of this. But we'll begin now with taking a breath, and now I'd like you to direct your breath in the body and see if you can place your awareness down to the belly button. And here we're going to kind of make an sound or an ah sound as you feel comfortable. And see if you can bring your awareness to stay in the belly and potentially notice sensation down the legs, down the feet, and into the ground. So we're letting the sound ground our energy. Let's do this two more times. Again, just letting the sound move the energy down the body, starting with the belly and down the legs, down the feet, into the and just see if you notice a shift in your sensation.
That's powerful. I feel like I'm more clear and level-headed and a little bit more grounded too. Like I'm in my feet now.
Yeah, right? Or just bringing our awareness back to the energy inside the body being the temple for the spirit, for the energy, to allow us to take action when we need to, or just simply rest in awareness. And how cool was that, right? That was like a few seconds of practice. So if some of us feel daunted that like we don't have the 45 minutes or hour to sit for meditation, we can certainly just engage in this practice. And this is a practice. Sometimes people ask me, well, when should I do this? In the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon? Yes. Anytime you really want. I do like to do some sound practices, and I share more in my retreats and things like that in the morning because I feel like it can really keep us awake and also centered. But I also find that when I need to just sort of discharge after a long day or a heavy day, I will engage in vocal practice. I just don't do super rigorous vocal practices like my heavy metal singing or something like that when I've had a long day because that's a lot of extra expenditure of energy. So, as you play with sound, you'll explore how sound is, in fact, consciousness itself. And your connection with your inner sound making is a way to expand your consciousness and deepen your relationship with the field.
Beautiful. And I really enjoyed that because I think one of my shocking discoveries of you, right? Because you're also a singer and in a genre that might not usually fit the typical yoga and meditation, right? But it's beautiful because I think like consciousness, there's such a range and spectrum of vibration in our state of being. And it's really why hearing you talk about all these things, Shamini, whether it's qigong, breathwork, meditation, dancing, singing, is really the biofield. It's all encompassing, right? It's part of
It is
inherently
the
part of our
divine Shakti.
consciousness.
Yes, it is the
Yeah.
divine Shakti in play, coming from the East Indian tradition, having a deep relationship with the divine feminine. Shakti, we describe as the manifest power that gives rise to everything in the universe. That's what I call Big B Biofield in my book. Big C consciousness then being the formless oneness, and Big B Biofield or Shakti being the manifest power that brings the formless into form. So, and
Mhm.
as I mentioned, sound is a great way to connect with those aspects of vibration, which in our traditions we call Shakti. And there it is all encompassing because there are so many flavors to it. We describe it as different elemental forces. And you can come into contact with those forces and harmonize them. That's the basis of Ayurveda, the basis of Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, native medicine, is to understand that we are all living vibration and we have certain qualities of vibration which we have described as elements. And when we come into contact and we harmonize those forces, we can create health. And so that's what working with the biofield really does. It helps us to harmonize those forces.
And just by the way you explained that, Shamini, it just makes so much sense to not only me but to everyone listening, right? Because it really comes back to that nature of our beingness, right? And expressing that authenticity. And when you're authentic, right, your field is coherent. And when your field is coherent, right, your thoughts and emotions, your body is going to reflect that. So kind of to coming to a close to our conversation, and thank you for that beautiful practice, by the way. I think that was just one way for all of us to experience the potential of using our biofield in, just in the spur of the moment. You really don't need anything. But to kind of end the conversation, um, if you had a chance to speak with 10-year-old Shamini, with the knowledge and wisdom that you have now, and looking back in the past, what would be the most important thing you would tell her in that 1 minute? Because I find that the stories we tell ourselves and the advice we wish we could have told ourselves in the past would have so dramatically improved the trajectory of our lives. So, is there anything personal or that you would like to share to her?
Yeah, beautiful. I have a good relationship with my inner child. So what I want to say to my inner child right now is keep at it. Believe in yourself and don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Beautiful. Yeah. And speaking of this unlimited field of consciousness and energy, right? It's a good reminder for all of us, especially for those that are healers out there or people that tend to give, right? There's the balance too, right? In receiving. And I think that part of my journey in healing as a wounded healer as well was learning to receive and to know and understand and believe, like you said, that everything that we need is right in front of us. It's just opening our eyes to the potential that it is already there. So thank you so much for that, Shamini. And to close, I know we spoke about a lot of things in terms of the resources at Chi and the film. Can you just kind of highlight that list again, just as another call to action for our audience, and just to direct them to the amazing resources and the projects that you have going on?
Yeah, absolutely. First, feel free to join me on my IG channel, Dr. Shamini Jain, which is probably tagged here. But I share some practices and kind of insights and events and things like that that I'm doing there, different things. Also, if you want a free grounding with sound practice, then just go to my website, shaminijan.com. And when you put in your email, you'll get that free grounding with sound practice, and also a really beautiful video dialogue with one of my favorite people on the planet who I've had the great privilege to teach with, Dr. Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton is if you guys don't know Bruce, oh my God, you've got to know him. He's written a seminal book, The Biology of Belief, and just a leading light in science and spirituality. So you'll get those free gifts. Also, do come and join our community at our free webinars on healing. You just literally go to webinarsonhealing.com and you'll see the list of who's coming in, and sign up and join us live. You'll also get a link to a free replay all weekend, and you can share that with others. And once you join the Chi community in whatever ways that you would like to, there's options for you to really support the nonprofit and support scaling our science and our education by being a contributor. Then you'll get access to all the amazing webinars that we have, like over 80 of them in perpetuity. It's our way of saying thank you. You also get free meditations in your inbox and things like that. If you go to chi.is, or Chi for Consciousness and Healing Initiative, chi.is, you'll learn more about our nonprofit and all of the ways that you can plug in.
Excellent. Well, I will have that all linked down below for our audience to check out. And I, again, highly recommend, especially the webinars, because that's how I got started. And I was so fascinated, even by the most recent one with Arnold Delorme there. It was so another fascinating highlight to as we were talking about the research and looking ahead to the amazing science that's being done. So I'm just so impressed, and thank you for having Chi as an organization to connect these amazing, brilliant minds to the public, and speak it in a way that's grounded, but also in a way that's easy to understand. So
Always better
appreciate that.
together. Yes. Thank you, Jason. Always better together. It's an honor.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Shamini, for your time and for your presence and for your really your wisdom and courage in moving this work forward. And as someone that is standing on the sidelines watching you and right reading your book and just the all the amazing people involved, I'm just so grateful to see and really excited right for the future of healing and biofield sciences, because it is a paradigm shift, right? And someone asked me a great question today. It's like, if you were to go through a deck of cards and each card was a lifetime, would you trade your current card in this lifetime for any other lifetime? And I'm like, no, this is a great lifetime. This is the most exciting lifetime I could think of, right? So, and that excitement extends to biofield therapies, because I think it's such we're on the cusp of something so amazing, as you know.
We
So
really
thank you for
are.
that.
Yeah, and thank you, Jason. You know what? Actually, if you don't mind, to circle back, given what you just said to that, what would you say to that 10-year-old? I'm thinking about my 9-year-old who, like all of us, and especially now, are kind of reckoning with the nature of suffering and the nature of the world. I remember being a 9-year-old being very distraught about this and wondering what the point of life really was. That was my wounded healer moment, really. Um, And I think what I would say to that child now is exactly what you are saying too, Jason, which is, yes, there is, well, you didn't quite say this, but what I would say is, yes, there is suffering. There is great suffering. And yet in the suffering lies the great potential. And that's what I think we could tell that child inside of us that might be struggling with seeing the way the world is now. There is great potential. There is great healing, and it is happening, and it is continuing to increase.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So inspirational. And thank you again, Shamini, for your presence and for just all the wisdom that you've shared. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation and just talking about the exciting developments that you have on your way. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much for the time and the opportunity, and kudos to all of the beautiful work that you're doing in the space as
Oh,
well.
thank you. Thank you so much.